The integrative course sequence is one of about 4 major changes we made to 3 undergraduate programs. So there are other goals we have, but the integrative course sequence was added to really try and achieve 3 things. One would be focused development of what most people call soft skills on an ongoing basis through the curriculum. So instead of giving them a course on speech communications and saying learn to do presentations in this course once in second year and they might never see it again, we wanted to build that soft skill development on an ongoing basis. So that was one of the outcomes. The second outcome we got to very quickly is we wanted our students to learn how to learn. And so we've included that as a soft skill, but to the extent we are trying to help develop future professionals, that whole ability for an attitude for continuous professional development was an important dimension. Those were the 2 initial reasons we thought of doing this. And then the third reason really was this idea that, okay, we also need to take responsibility for helping our students learn how to integrate, initially across different accounting and finance functions. And so they know how to integrate financial reporting with finance, for example, tax. So when they look at an issue, they look at it as a business issue, and then they look at how do they bring the accounting and finance capabilities to that issue or decision. And as we started to refine that idea, we realized, okay, well, they've also got to be able to integrate with their understanding of business, and it'd be nice if they could actually work in a team while they were doing and basically communicate what they found. And so ultimately it started becoming integration across a whole range of competencies and skills. And so our hope is by the end of the 4 years, we have a set of graduates coming out of undergrad programs with what we call the capacity to integrate. And so they know how to pull things together, but they also know how to work with people who have different capabilities, so engineers and marketeers, and they can collaborate with them when the decisions involve a lot more than just accounting and finance. We're not trying to sort of develop generalists, because simply the scope of our programs, by definition, are reasonably narrow. And the point we make all the time is we are not a business school. We compete with business schools. We have a School of Accounting and Finance, and so students coming into that have self-selected, or their parents have self-selected for them, that they're going to focus on this area. And I think what we're trying to do is, instead of asking them to become generalists, ask them to understand the context within they operate, they make decisions, and so they understand that there's a bigger picture and they can see the bigger picture. Now, whether that ultimately turns them into a generalist, I don't know. One of the, I think the best pieces of career advice I ever got was when I got into management consulting. They actually talked about a career as an hourglass. And they said you start reasonably broad, and then if you're going to move up, you need some kind of specialization because you need to be able to add that value to a team or to a client. And then over time, you will become broad again by definition. And so hopefully as students go through the program, they'll develop some of the skills they need to try and draw their own hourglass when they get out. We decided to take this integrative approach now probably based on 2 drivers. So I personally believe on this campus anyway, we have done some level of integration implicitly. At least we did in mid-1980s when I was a student here. But when I was a student here, the size of the cohort was much smaller. We were a graduating class of 23. Even when they got the program up to 50 or 75, you could do it implicitly. And faculty would just kind of work together to make that happen. When you get to the scale we're at, which is a cohort of 375, to 400 students, it can't be implicit anymore. We have to, as a faculty, sort of make commitments to make it happen, and we've got to make the students aware that it's something that's expected of them. So that really was one driver, which was how do we try and scale this? The other driver, and I've sort of referenced it a couple of times, Howard Gardner's book on sort of 5 Minds for the Future has had a pretty significant impact, at least on me, and whatever influence I've had on our programming design. And he certainly talks about, as we move forward in the future, there's going to be increasing pressure for specialization. And the more people specialize and the deeper they get, the harder it is for them to draw connections and actually get to what he calls a synthesizing mind. And so we looked at that and said, we can certainly see it in our professions. In accounting, finance, there's increasing specialization, and so you may be a tax specialist, but the really good tax specialists are the ones that can go deep and can also come up and look across. And so ultimately, we're hoping we're preparing our students for that kind of future. I think we're at a point right now where you see positive impact from the first year course. And so we did, almost as soon as the course was finished, a debrief with the faculty who were teaching the students. We did a debrief with the faculty. We also did a debrief with 14 Masters of Accounting students who had acted as TAs as part of our integrated case competition. And we did a survey of the students, although specifically just on the integrative case, not on the course as a whole. We're sort of relying on the regular course assessments to track that. And what we learned from all 3 sort of groups, so the instructors, the TAs, and the students, gave us some common themes to sort of reinforce that what we were trying to do, we were achieving. And so we were trying to put them in a situation where they had to go back and remember or relearn some of the accounting and finance course content that they had taken. And they certainly were aware that they needed to do that, but they weren't comfortable doing that. And so from my perspective, what we were trying to accomplish through this soft skill development, we achieved. So they're aware of the need and their ability in terms of communication, interpersonal, and ability to work with other people. And that piece, we're going to tweak a little bit, but that piece I think worked well. What we learned coming out of version 1 of the first year course was we also need to put some specific steps in place to help the first year students actually make that transfer happen. And while we can sit back and say it should be natural, can you just figure this out? And some of them can figure it out. It's probably a better learning experience if we actually facilitate that process, particularly the first time through. Our plans for assessment right now are really competency or learning outcome driven. And as we've moved through the process, even with just the first year course in place and the work we're doing right now with design on the second year course, I'm mentally starting to make a distinction between those 2 things and look at it from a perspective that says we need to be very clearly assessing against learning outcomes. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that assessment is going to be rubric driven. Mm-hmm. And driven through cases, driven through projects, assignments, and essentially doing the evaluation against that. Some of which, hopefully, we can capture as the students go through and essentially use it as the basis for any portfolio. And again, use that to integrate with work terms and some of the things they're already doing with ePortfolio. So that assessment against learning outcomes, hopefully we can get 3 perspectives on it. And certainly when Anson was presenting a few weeks ago, he talked about the fact that he knew he was learning when he had done a self-assessment, when he'd gotten an assessment from the instructor, and when he'd gotten an assessment or sort of peer evaluation. And I'd like to think as we go along with the learning outcomes, we will try and reinforce those 3 measures. But what the 4-course sequence allows us to do is say, okay, those are learning outcomes. We can measure those and need to measure those through the 4 courses, but we can also measure those in all of our other courses. And we can and should be doing that. And so we're trying to put the plans in place to do that. What the 4 integrative courses give us an opportunity to do is to actually measure whether the student is competent. And so we're now at the sort of process with the 2nd year course of trying to say, okay, well, at this point, how would we define competent? And it really is an integrative activity, because the various professional associations we try and work with in accounting and finance have lots of wonderful definitions for competency, most of which require you to use the word competent in the definition, which isn't terribly helpful, particularly for students. But Dr. Peter Jensen has one definition for competent that I love, and he just says it's the ability to do it when it really matters in the real world. And so we're trying to design the cases at a level that says this is what we think you need to be able to do at this point out in the real world. So before you go on your next work term, this is what we expect you would see. Can you actually do this? And that, I think, increasingly is something we're going to try and build into the program, specifically in each of those sort of 4 courses. And it becomes hopefully an evaluation of the students, of the program, and potentially of some of the courses where if we see students continually not being able to go back and transfer that knowledge, becomes a means to say, okay, well, we've got to do something about how we're teaching X or Y, because there's something that's not happening. The students aren't able to transfer. In terms of getting instructors engaged with the 4-course sequence, the experience we had with the 1st year course, which is a little different from years 2, 3, and 4, was very successful, I think, for 2 reasons. One, we had faculty on campus who were teaching speech communications courses who viewed this as a great opportunity. So they have taught our students before. They know the strengths and weaknesses of our students, and they were reasonably confident that our students would put the effort in to try something new. And so from that perspective, they looked at this as a real opportunity. And we were able to convince them and then actually deliver that we would do the parts that they didn't want to do and couldn't do. So certainly, for example, evaluation of the accounting and finance content in a presentation. We didn't expect them to do that, but we had to deliver the Masters of Accounting students, the really strong ones, who could step in and do that very well. And so from that perspective, it was trying to make sure that everyone understood the roles that they needed to do and that they were being given the chance to really succeed given what they wanted to do and what they could do. In terms of moving forward into the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th year courses, I think where we've had success getting people interested is simply by positioning it as an educational challenge. We're trying to learn as we go how to do this, and that appeals to certain individuals. And fortunately, we've got a fair number of those individuals in the School of Accounting and Finance.